Phone check. 1, 2. The microphone check. 1, 2, 1, 2. The microphone check. I got my headphones tuned between two different AM stations, and my briefcase is full of declassified information. Declassified. Declassified.
Good evening and welcome to News from Neptune for the 7th of September in the 36th week of 2012. For more than 20 years, our program has been a spontaneous and unrehearsed discussion on the news of the week and its coverage by the media. First on a so-called community radio station, and when locked out of there, welcomed, I'm happy to say, by the good people at Urbana Public Television. Oh, and this just in. Local liberal censorship continues. I've just been banned from the public listserv of the local Occupy group for not being sufficiently enthusiastic about the persecutor of Bradley Manning. Maybe we'll say more about this as the hour goes on. I'm Carl Estabrook, and my discussers tonight are David Johnson and Ron Szoke. We'll take turns suggesting an item from the week's news that's been ignored or misreported, or I guess in some senses not reported, and sometimes even innocently that may have happened, and then giving the others a chance to comment on it. Our program's name, News from Neptune, was chosen to honor Noam Chomsky, who's been talking sense about American politics for more than twice the 20 years we've been on the air. Chomsky has said that in the American media, either you repeat the same conventional doctrines everybody is saying, or else you say something true, and it will sound like it's from Neptune. Today is September 7th. On this day in 1876, in Northfield, Minnesota, Jesse James and the James Younger gang attempted to rob the town's only bank, but they were driven off by armed citizens. Fast forward to today, when the banks are robbing the citizens, and there is no one driving them off. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. So, with Jesse James and Cole Younger in mind, we'll remember the Northfield, Minnesota bank robbery in 1876. This is the News from Neptune, the I've been thrown out of better bars than this one edition. We'll start with Rod Szoke.
Yes, well, there once was a very good movie, by the way, called The Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid, which I would recommend.
Who directed that? I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. I've forgotten, but anyway.
We'll get our crack research staff to work on that.
Right. I would suggest it if someone has a chance to see it. I want to comment on the big rise in the stock markets yesterday, Thursday. September 6th. There was a jump of about 2%, apparently motivated by the statement of the European Central Bank that they will start buying bonds, a limited number of bonds, in order to support the euro and to help bail out Greece. This is becoming important. The approaching economic and, it appears, social crisis in Greece, I think, is starting to scare a few people. Their austerity plan is troubling the country greatly. The pensions are not being funded. Public workers are being fired. Some of the police are rebelling and preventing the other police from being sent off to Thessaloniki to keep down the rioters there. And in the immediate future, it looks more and more like barricades and flames in the streets of the Greek cities, Athens and Thessaloniki and so on. And when even the police are that deeply divided about what's going on, I think it's a sign of real trouble. So there's an approaching crisis in Greece. The choice was apparently to pay off as much as possible the bondholders, meaning the rich, and impose austerity upon everyone else. And there are similar approaching crises in Spain and Italy, I hear, which is much more important because they are far larger economies. And whether they can be taken down the same road of austerity with the consequent decline of living standards and even necessities for the majority of the population remains to be seen. Headline, Greek government and public at odds over new cuts. So on the streets of Athens, there's a sense that the latest effort to placate Greece's lenders may be a last straw for the public. After 2.5 years of wrenching austerity, they will not be able to get more money from us than they already have, said her this woman, as her three teenage daughters and husband nodded in agreement. Mark my words, she said, and added, in the coming months there will be a revolution and the government will fall. So there's, it appears, a direct causal connection between the austerity measures that are being imposed upon Greece by the central bankers of Europe and the unrest and apparently a more open rebellion that's taking place there. Next headline, central bank sets bond plan meant to ease the euro debt peril. The European Central Bank said Thursday it has agreed to a framework for buying the bonds of troubled Eurozone countries on the open market in unlimited quantities, but left the timing unclear. So the ECB also announced it would hold interest rates at their record low level of 0.75%.
0.75%?
Yeah, practically, yeah.
It's not even
Close
1%.
right?
Yeah.
This is this indeed. I think you have put your finger on perhaps the most important story of the day, Ron. To start with, you got a comment on this situation in Europe, David, and the American stock market's response? How are your own investments doing?
Well, I have no investments, like most working class people, except for I do get a carpenter's pension, so in a way I am tied into that system to some degree. Unfortunately, not by choice, of course. So I can't say it doesn't affect me in some way, somewhere down the road, hopefully not. But what's interesting is that in Europe, they're fighting back, and I'm just waiting for when are we going to start fighting back, because even though the austerity has been much worse in Greece, and it's now moved to Spain, so much so that the recent miners' strike, there was pitched battles with the police where the miners were even firing rockets at the riot police. But nevertheless, I mean, it is being done here as well. We don't... you know, it's done a little bit more subtly. It's done to segments of the population that aren't as well organized to fight back. The Europeans are more class conscious than the Americans on average, and I think that's one factor of why a lot of them are fighting back more at this point anyway.
You got a take on that, Ron?
Yes. Again, I think we're engaged in a kind of experiment to see how far this can go,
Indeed, right.
this degree of inequality, before obvious social breakdown occurs. And there will be more rioting and barricades in the streets, more or less on the 19th century model. I've long thought that that's impossible, but it's spreading to some of the most advanced countries in Europe. And could it happen here?
Well, it's clearly what our rulers are worried about.
Yes.
I mean, that's why we've seen this remarkable coordination of police from Washington over this last year or so, and this building up of police riot capabilities, so to speak. There's a sense in which I think the Occupy movement came along at an interesting time for our rulers, in that they were able to try out their techniques here. They're desperately afraid that the sort of things that the Greek woman you quoted are growing in this country, even though we have the notion that it's only those foreigners who do stuff like that, and in America that couldn't happen. Our rulers are clever enough to think that indeed, as things got bad, it could happen, and they have to be prepared. And the preparation are police preparations, and it's going on as we speak.
Next straw, the report from the Constitutional Accountability Center in June found that before the Obamacare decision was rendered, in every case before the court this term, the majority has found in favor of the position taken by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, a conservative lobbying group. So that's the trend, the drift, and how far can that go? Again, we're testing the limit there. Where's the envelope? And we don't know yet.
And I wanted to comment too on your point of how far can it go. There is an aspect of the reporting that makes it difficult to see why that's the problem. What we hear are phrases about Europe, are phrases like, what's the one you used? Want to see what European governments are going to do to ease the euro debt peril.
Right.
Now, that's wonderfully abstract, and that's what Americans hear. What they're actually talking about, of course, is countries that owe money to lenders, rich people, banks, and whether the banks are going to be able to extract that money, whether the countries are going to be able to pay that money back, mainly by establishing what's being called austerity, which is a matter of taking out of the hides of the population. So the question is pretty straightforward. How are we going to arrange it so that the banks are paid off by reducing the standard of living of most Europeans? That's the issue. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find a way to do that, and mainly to find a way to do that without people's really realizing what's being done to them so that they will say, we don't want to do this. And the same problem is here. The same problem is before us. The extent to which the present administration is busily introducing American-style austerity, and will do so in its second term, if there is one, is pointed out by few American commentators, but one of the ones who's done it best is Glenn Ford at the wonderful site Black Agenda Report. He was on Democracy Now! This morning in a debate with Michael Eric Dyson about the Democrats. And he pointed this out. Ford points this out right away. While Dyson is saying, of course, we've got to reelect Mr. Obama or to save us from the evil Mr. Romney, and on. We've heard that before. Ford was pointing out, look, what in fact are Obama's policies? And one of the first, top of the list, austerity, for the same reason that austerity is the policy of the European governments.
More straws, more questions arising. Headline in Bloomberg Business Week, recession taking hold in Eurozone. OECD says Europe's debt crisis is pushing the 17-country Eurozone toward recession and dragging down the global economy, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development said Thursday. Even growth in the traditional economic powerhouse Germany is slowing, and the OECD's interim assessment said that Europe's largest economy could slip into recession by the end of the year. Quoting, the negative elements in the global economy, stemming mostly from Europe, are there, and they are somewhat stronger than they used to be a few months ago, the chief economist Payodan told reporters. So they are getting danger signals as well in Europe, and we're again seeing the extent to which international finance capital is a complex, interconnected phenomenon. Next straw, number of the week, half of U.S. lives in households getting benefits, 49.1%, and this is something that apparently scandalizes Republicans, right-wingers, and so on. Its supposed effect on the moral fiber of the public, and what will be its effects? Tell me.
To go back a step, if we could, Ron,
Sure.
you got a comment, David, on who's dragging down the world economy?
Yeah.
Well, that's real interesting. I mean, what I think is interesting is look at Latin America. I mean, majority of countries in Latin America, with the exception of the ones that are closest to the current U.S. government, like Chile, Peru, and Colombia, those countries that are taking a different path are doing quite well. Brazil, is having a boom. Argentina's doing quite well. Venezuela's doing well. Even Ecuador and Bolivia. Why is that? It's because they're not following the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund model. So, I mean, I think this is quite interesting. I mean, you know, when people talk about, you know, oh, there's just not enough money, we have these hard choices, we have budgets. Well, a budget is just another way of putting, it's another spin, it's another word for priorities. Okay, I mean, and I think this is interesting, Ron, that you mentioned this. I had no idea that 49% of the U.S. population is receiving some kind of government benefit, and you mean either Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, disability, something of that nature. Affecting the moral fiber, I guess starvation and homelessness builds character, huh? Well, let's see Mitt Romney or Barack Obama try being homeless for a while and see how good that does to their character. Well, anyway, I mean, you know, it just amazes me, not so much of people like Romney, who is part of the ruling class, or someone like Barack Obama, who basically sucks up to the ruling class. But what amazes me is that a lot of working class people out there are buying into this whole thing about, well, yes, Obama's bad, yes, yeah, he's trying to cut Social Security and Medicare, yes, he's expanded the wars, yes, he hasn't really done anything to help working people and unions. He's broken almost every campaign promise he made, but the alternative is much worse.
That's right.
What's really interesting, there's a recent article by Jeffrey Sachs where he compares the proposed Romney-Ryan budget, and he compares it to the Obama-Biden budget for fiscal year 2014. Well, what's really interesting when you look at the numbers, the cutbacks to Social Security and Medicare are within a matter of a few tenths of a percentage point. A few tenths of a percentage points. Otherwise, they're identical. So, I mean, what's happening here is that, as we well know, the corporations have bought off both parties now for quite a few years. I mean, I first started noticing the phenomena back in 92, 93, shortly after, I should say, after Bill Clinton was elected. And it's just gotten worse. It hasn't gotten any better. And I mean, by buying off both political parties, and they play this good cop, bad cop game by telling one constituency, oh my God, he's not that great, but the other guy's worse. They're able to be able to win no matter who wins, and then we lose no matter who wins. I mean, this can't go on, people. We've got to start realizing who's pulling our strings, and we have to start taking control. We either have to start taking over the Democratic Party at the local level and expanding with our own homegrown candidates who will take a no corporate money pledge and go after and weed out the corporate Democrats. And I believe in addition to that, a dual strategy, hedge our bets just like the corporations do. We need to start a citizens party, a third party, to have an outside pressure, a push-pull strategy, an inside-outside strategy.
It may be true. I do get a little worried sometimes when people talk about how we need to we need a new party. Hey, we had a lot of new parties, you know, over the years. We need to seize the Democrats. Something else. This is all true. I would prefer to concentrate on the things directly that we need, not the instrumentalities that might be necessary to get there. It may be perfectly worthwhile, and it may be necessary along the way to get at those instrumentalities. I'm thinking of the parties and similar organizations. But in the meantime, let's talk about how we need jobs. Obama invoked the New Deal the other day. He wants to talk about a new Deal. But he's not really, no, he says this, but he's not, as usual, this is typical Obama, fake left, drive right, you know. The one thing from the New Deal that we obviously need today is the New Deal's jobs program. The WPA, the Works Progress Administration, in the depths of the Depression, after the New Deal had been around for a while, began to provide jobs for people who needed them. Now look, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which Ron mentioned to me right before we started today, it's a good place to start this, it essentially guarantees your right to a job. It says the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations, the United States as a signatory, in 1948. And it eventually, as in the reconstruction of the world after the Second World War, says essentially you have a right to a job. And it's up to the government to see that you get one. Now, of course, we've never done that in this country. Even the WPA didn't do that, but it came a lot closer than anything that's been done recently, and a lot closer than, much closer than anything the Obama administration is even thinking about. So let's talk about worker demanding a jobs program whereby every American who wants a job, a decent job at a living wage, gets one, and the government does it. There's a program I can get behind. There's a program that seems to me worthwhile. And to just put a cap on it, as we talk about the recession and the world slipping back into recession, which it seems to be, what, after all, is the one thing that can bring the recession to an end? A consumer demand, spending, your spending, my spending, the spending of people in this country who have decent jobs at decent wages, spending in this country of people who have income supports and then can go out and buy the things that they need. Before humanity can do art, politics, or religion, it must first of all have food, clothing, and shelter, someone said at a funeral long ago. Now, look, what we need are programs whereby folks are able to do the sort of spending, to make the sort of consumer demands that brings a recession to an end. What do poor people need? Money.
Yes.
And if we can't find a way in our present economic system to provide it to them, we're going to have to change that system.
Oh, that's too simple.
Sorry, I'm feeling simple today.
Yeah. Let me continue with a bit of this from the Wall Street Journal, in fact. The 49.1% of the population in a household that gets benefits is up from 30% in the early 1980s and 44.4% as recently as the third quarter of 2008. The increase in recent years is likely due in large part to the lingering effects of the recession. As of early 2011, 15% of people lived in a household that received food stamps, 26% had someone enrolled in Medicaid, and 2% had a member receiving unemployment benefits. Families doubling up to save money or pool expenses also are likely leading to more multi-generational households, but even without the effects of the recession, there would be a larger reliance on government. So what this is creating in the minds of some is skepticism about capitalism itself, and that is the outcome that must be avoided. So don't lose faith that capitalism will ultimately provide, and the free markets in their operation, automatic operation, will make everyone wealthy, healthy, wise, whatever, as Mr. Romney urges us to think. So do you believe in the magnificent effects of the free market, David?
Well, I mean, you know, it's funny because when you talk about capitalism, you ask 10 people on the street what capitalism is, and you're going to get about probably at least 9 different answers.
Very good point.
I mean, let me try to distinguish what in my opinion, is the difference. Okay, capitalism is not, I repeat, is not what we've had since the beginning, actually before civilization, which is the exchange of goods and services. That is not capitalism. Capitalism is when large corporations or other economic concentrations of wealth not only control the economy, but they also control our elected government. That is the essence of capitalism. And the thing is that people, when you that are critical of capitalism, of course, what a lot of times they'll shoot back at you. You say, well, do you want to go back? You want to go to a system of the Soviet Union where the government owns everything? Or do you want to go to a system of anarchy where there's no small businesses? Well, that's just hyperbole. I mean, that's not at all what people are advocating. We're advocating basically economic democracy along with political democracy. That can make lots of things. Basically, not allowing corporations to have any influence or control over our elected government. That means not letting corporations get too powerful through mergers and acquisitions acquisitions. That also means going to another system of where there's more worker-owned cooperatives in the society. And yes, there's even a role, I believe, for the state actually running certain industries. For instance, I think the state should be in control, or let me rephrase that. I think all communities should be able to control their water source, and frankly also their cable systems, internet systems. And as far as the national power grid, I think it's perfectly appropriate for the government to control that. And as far as healthcare, a single payer system, which really the government doesn't control, it's just that they make sure that it's financed and everyone receives medical care. That's another thing about the International Declaration of Human Rights too, Carl, is that it also, besides guaranteed job, is guaranteeing access to healthcare and guaranteeing access to education, which we do not have in this country.
One could argue that that's implied by the foundation documents of this country, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Indeed.
It's up, remember in that phrase, it's the responsibility of government to secure those rights. How do you secure the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Well, since we're not disembodied spirits floating around thinking about whether we're happy or not, we secure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by eating regularly and living in a way that is physically possible for us. And therefore, the government has the right and the responsibility to see that those things are taken care of in the most fundamental American tradition. Long before one begins to talk about socialism or anything of that sort, which has to do with the way you organize your society, we have these rights that we take to be self-evident. So.
You know what's interesting too, Carl, of course, is that the people that are talking about how bad big government is, well, I mean, government is only as good as the citizens' control of it.
Of course.
And of course, the people that are talking about, how horrible big government is, of course, these are the same people, Mitt Romney included, who are the first ones to dip into the public trough and take as much public money as possible to enrich themselves. Not to mention, they definitely want the police and the military funded in order to protect themselves from their victims.
Yep, absolutely right. And it's also the case that we've got a system in which we're being encouraged to be critical of big government, and the people who are doing the encouraging are those who profit from the fact that the majority of us don't use the big government to restrain them, to restrain the things that those corporations and so forth do. Back to some of the basic questions. I mean, since we're talking about home truths here today on News from Neptune, one of the first things you want to say about an order that you want to call capitalist, and I take very seriously your notion, David, that it's not clear that the situation we can talk about, the actual economy and polity that we live in, can be called capitalist today. There's some difficulties about that, but one of the things about it is that the production of the needs of human existence, remember those physical bodies I was talking about a minute ago, the production for the needs of human existence is carried on by the relationship between two groups in the society. One very small group who says, we own the things that you need in order to produce food, clothing, and shelter. Okay, that's what you do, and a much larger group that includes, in fact, probably the three of us and maybe you too, who don't own the things that we need to produce food, clothing, and shelter. I don't know how many farms you own or how many factories or what else you have, but in any case.
I've lost track.
I know. I wasn't including you, Ron. All these rich people, they have a problem. But for a lot of the rest of us, in fact, the vast majority of the rest of us, we have to sell ourselves or actually rent ourselves. Selling was considered bad news by the end of the 19th century. We have to rent ourselves to the owners of capital in order to eat regularly. So this is the system. This is the system that's going on here. But every now and then, those people who have to rent themselves to the owners of factories, farms, and so forth, who have to rent themselves, get around and say, now, wait a minute. Is this what we want to do? Do we want those guys, that little group of owners, to decide how we're going to spend the wealth of the society, what food we're going to produce, what sort of schools, houses, so forth we're going to produce? Or do we want to do it ourselves, all of us together? All of us are smarter than some of us, probably, and maybe we should all do it together. And that's then these dangerous democratic notions get in the way of a finely functioning capitalist system where the small group of owners tell the much larger group of workers what sort of work they can or can't do.
Carl, I'd like to make one distinction there about people that own farms. First of all, you have a lot of small independent or medium-sized independent farmers out there. They own the farmland, they produce the food, but they don't control the agricultural commodities market.
Right.
They don't control the agricultural food distribution system. So really, they're also renting themselves out.
Yes, of course.
Their labor. Now, there has been an interesting phenomena that's going on in the last, I'd say, 30 years or more. That's becoming more and more common. Is that more and more farmland is not owned by individuals. It's owned by corporations.
Exactly.
And they basically will rent out the house that was traditionally owned by the original owner of the farmland, who sold it off long ago, rent it to basically people that are sharecropping, who do all the work, and then the corporations come in and they take the product that the person farms, and then they sell it for a profit, and then make some kind of deal with the person who actually does the work as far as free or reduced rent and money in addition to that as well.
And we're back to a system of owners and those who have to rent themselves to the
Yes,
owners,
indeed.
in this case, the former farmers.
But how often have you heard young graduates urged to get out there and sell yourself?
That's right. Yeah,
Right?
Yeah. You'd think that would raise an eyebrow, at least in some quarters, but still,
Right.
I don't know. You're watching News from Neptune, a spontaneous and unrehearsed discussion of the news of the week and its coverage by the media, and we're taking turns bringing up stories that have been misreported or badly reported or perhaps even mistakenly reported during the week. David, you got a candidate here?
A candidate.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean it quite that way. No,
Yes.
Do you have an example of such a story? Perhaps it involves a candidate.
Right.
Okay, well,
Your choice.
oh
Your
boy.
deal. Your deal.
I tell you, I've tried to watch segments of both the Republican and the Democratic convention, and I just don't have much patience for it. I mean, you talk about having to have a shovel and a high pair of boots to get through the cow manure. I mean, it's incredible. And the Democrats are just as bad as Republicans. In fact, I think the only thing that I liked between the two of them was the appearance of Clint Eastwood at the Republican convention.
Hear, hear.
Now,
Hear, hear.
he came off a little odd, but he made some interesting
He
statements,
did indeed.
like about withdrawing troops from Afghanistan.
That's right.
Well, what I found really interesting was a few days later, I've seen an article from Forbes magazine where they are just basically going and saying that the Republican convention people made a huge mistake by letting Clint Eastwood go
that's
on
right.
without rehearsing with him and make sure that he had the right message. Basically, just letting him go on and say whatever he wanted, because evidently he was not saying the message they wanted the delegates and the public to hear.
That's a very important point. We talked about this here. I think that's quite right. The way I've been talking about it is that what Clint Eastwood represented was the neurosis of the Republican Party, the return of the repressed. And what was repressed, of course, was the Ron Paul position, anti-Wall Street, anti-war. That was carefully repressed, took some effort, but it was carefully repressed, the Republican convention. And then it pops out again in this bizarre symptom of Clint Eastwood. It's wonderful. I mean, this is straight out of psychoanalytic textbooks. Of how the repressed, the repressed notions appear as bizarre symptoms. He was wonderful. I thought it was fantastic. And the notion that he was just bumbling around and making it up on the spot is absolutely false. The man is a good actor and director, and what he did there was carefully thought out and acted and directed by him, and not by the Republican Party. And that's what the Journal was complaining about.
Back to the dramatic change, it's overcome agriculture. Since I was a boy, the emphasis always was then on producing more. And that's how you prospered. Now, listen to the agricultural reports on the radio, and all you will hear is market news about the charts and the futures and options and so on. It's all about making smart buy and sell decisions. So it's no longer farming, it's agribusiness.
That's too true. And I mean, as David was pointing out, that slips back into the pattern of American production, what we're doing there. And since we're on the subject, it may be worthwhile to point out what has become, I think, maybe to many Americans, increasingly clear recently, and that is the fact that there's been a big change in the system in our adult lifetimes. I'm thinking over the last 30 years and more, there's been quite a change of that model or that image we had of American industry, American business, and American farming together. And the big change is that we've sent the jobs abroad and financialized the economy.
Yes.
The economy now is not based on producing food or things in factories or anything else. It's based on producing paper, on selling money to other people, and so we are in a position where the stock market does well, as you pointed out, Ron, because it looks like the euro crisis is going to be solved, i.e. the money is going to be found to pay the banks, and the money will come out of the hods of the Europeans. That raises all sorts of new questions about whether we should be happy with an economy that has been so financialized.
Yeah, but well, the working classes in Greece, Spain, and Italy must be disciplined, and this will be imposed upon them by the big financial institutions, the European Central Bank, or whatever.
And once again, no difference between the U.S. and
Right.
Europe. Excuse me, David.
No, it's okay. I find that interesting. Discipline for money they didn't borrow.
That's right.
But yet that they are expected to pay back in
Right.
one form
Exactly.
or another.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, in Greece, this has taken the form of not only people losing their jobs and their pensions being cut in half, but also their utility rates being doubled or tripled as well. Also, rents and mortgages going up in price and everything. So, I mean, they get squeezed. Oh, and also increased taxes on wage earners.
Right.
I mean, so you talk about being squeezed from every which direction. I mean, it's just outrageous. I mean, it wasn't like the Greek people all got $100,000 in a couple of years span and went on, bought wonderful houses on the ocean and went on vacations and bought Ferraris. I mean, this was money borrowed by rich, basically borrowed by rich people, the Greek, ruling class. And now, and the government took out money. Oh, that was interesting too. And some of the debt negotiations, Germany was saying that they had to cut back on all these public expenditures except military spending, especially buying jet fighter planes made in Germany. I mean, are the priorities here a little twisted or what?
There's a notion that's been introduced in other circumstances that's worthwhile here called odious debt. Odious debt is debt accrued by a government which is then extracted, as you described, David, from the people. The example that's often used is how repressive governments and dictatorships go into the arms market, which usually brings them to the United States, of course, is the biggest arms supplier in the world, buys a lot of guns and whatnot in order to keep the people in place and so forth, and runs up debts to U.S., as we say gently in this country, defense contractors.
More profiteers.
Yeah, war profiteers, exactly. It runs up big debts to them. And then when the dictator is overthrown, the people are told, by the way, you owe those arm producers all this money. You have to go pay those defense contractors. And the U.S. government is very concerned about that and make sure that these governments that overthrow dictators do it. The term for that, as I say, is odious debt, and there is a move frequently by the new governments to renounce those odious debts. This goes back to the 19th century. Was it Commodore Vanderbilt who had the Roosevelt administration send a gunboat to Latin America to collect an odious debt like that? Which, of course, the U.S. government did in those days. I have to look at those.
Was that Teddy
details.
Roosevelt, Carl? Or?
I think so. I think it was the first Roosevelt administration. But we should remember the tradition of odious debt in the situation that Europe finds itself in today. The governments that borrowed all that money are, in fact, forcing their populace to pay odious debts.
A similar example here that's in the state of Illinois and other states around the country is where in recent years the state, in this case the state of Illinois and other states as well, borrowed money from their public employees' pension funds, can't pay it back, won't pay it back, and to add the cherry to the cake, are expecting the workers they borrowed the money from to begin with to pay it back. Yeah. I mean, this should be illegal. It should be criminal.
And in a federal government, in a federal system like this, there is a obvious place for the state to look for these monies. That is the federal government. But of course, we don't do that because the federal government, even if we can't stomach the fact that the federal government can borrow money at essentially zero interest if it wants to, because the lenders know that they'll get it back. The federal government could also tax those rich people for the money in order to fulfill those requirements for the majority. Instead, it borrows that money from those rich people and pays it back to them. So what we're missing here is a tax system that taxes wealth, that taxes that little group of owners we were talking about earlier, rather than the large group of those who have only their labor to sell. This is a situation that we are going to have to take into hand. All the talk about deficit and debt that we've been hearing is smoke and mirrors. The deficit is a chimera. The deficit would disappear tomorrow if we were to tax wealth. You mentioned, last time I mentioned this, Ron, you brought up the Tobin tax, the tax on transactions, the tax on the financialization of the economy. There's not an issue there, folks, except the fact that both our business parties tell us there is. Which reminded me of something I wanted to mention earlier when you were talking about this. The one line from the campaign so far that I most treasure is Barack Obama's, of course, when he said, "No one's willing to give me credit for the cuts I was willing to make in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid."
He just doesn't get any respect.
Exactly.
Well, what's really amazing is these Democratic delegates and your rank-and-file Democratic voters are cheering this.
Yes, exactly.
Because they've bought the line, and I've gotten into arguments with a lot of different working people on this, where they say, "Oh, but he had to do it."
Yeah.
It's
Right.
Basically, it's like bombing the village to save it in Vietnam.
Exactly.
Cutting Social Security and Medicare to save it. Well,
That's right.
That's not what the agenda is. The agenda is to privatize it. So that it can go into the hands of both Barack Obama and Mitt Romney's masters on Wall Street, so that they can get their hands on that money, so they can speculate it and make more money on it. And then we're going to be, how should I say, when we come time to want to be able to draw on our money, we may end up like what happened in Chile after market economy was imposed on the Chilean people in 1973 at the point of a bayonet through a brutal military dictatorship. Well, they privatized Social Security, and within 10 years, it was totally default. And all these workers that had paid into it for decades didn't get a dime. What's interesting, though, is that privatization didn't apply to members of the military.
Yeah.
They kept the government Social Security system for themselves.
You're watching News from Neptune. In these concluding minutes, I have a deal, so to speak, on this particular card game. The misreported story that struck me as most important this week was the question of where real political danger is coming from. A lot of talk about the danger of Mr. Romney or the danger of, I don't know, Romney. He thinks it's Russia, right? I don't know. Where's the real political danger coming from in politics? Or and by politics here, I must say that I mean what we've been talking about, the decisions about the use of wealth and power. That's politics. Politics is not whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's how you make those decisions about the use of wealth and power. And in that, where is the real danger coming from? The danger, it seems to me, is not that Tweedledum will be replaced by Tweedledummer as president. That's not the problem. The real danger comes in 2012, in September, from the United States and Israel. Noam Chomsky writes about this week, our mentor for this program, and asks you to imagine the following. He says, imagine Iran. Iran is carrying out a murderous and destructive low-level war against Israel with great power participation. They got the backing of Russia or something like that. Its leaders announced that negotiations are going nowhere. The Iranian leaders say, they're carrying out this war against Israel, and they say nothing's happening. Israel refuses to sign the non-proliferation treaty and allow inspections, as Iran has done. Israel continues to defy the overwhelming international call for a nuclear weapons-free zone in the region. Throughout, Iran enjoys the support of its superpower patron. They're going to force Israel to sign on to the weapons ban treaty, the non-proliferation treaty. Iranian leaders are therefore announcing their intentions to bomb Israel and prominent Iranian military analysts report that the attack may happen before the U.S. elections. Iran can use its powerful air force and new submarines sent by Germany, armed with nuclear missiles and stationed off the coast of Israel. Whatever the timetable, Iran is counting on its superpower backer to join it, if not lead the assault. Russia is going to do it for Iran if they don't do it themselves. U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta says that while we do not favor such an attack as a sovereign country, Iran will act in its best interests. Yeah, sure. This is all unimaginable, of course, though it is actually happening with the cast of characters reversed. That's what Israel doing vis-a-vis Iran. The analogies are never exact, and this one is a little bit unfair. It's unfair to Iran. Like its patron, Israel resorts to violence at will. Its patron is us. It persists in illegal settlements in occupied territory, some annexed, all in brazen defiance of international law and the UN Security Council. It has repeatedly carried out brutal attacks against Lebanon and the imprisoned people of Gaza, the world's largest prison camp. It's killed tens of thousands without credible pretext. 30 years ago, Israel destroyed an Iraqi nuclear reactor, an act that has recently been praised as an example of what should be done with Iran. Avoiding the strong evidence, even from U.S. intelligence, that the bombing did not end Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons program, but rather began it, initiated it. Bombing of Iran might finally have the same effect. Iran says they're not building a bomb, don't want to, and don't intend to. But in the model of Iraq, if they're attacked, Iran, too, has carried out aggression, but during the past several hundred years, the only times they have was when they were ruled by a U.S.-backed dictator, the Shah. We put him there, and he ruled as we wanted him to for a while until he was overthrown by his own people. That's the only time Iran has attacked any of its neighbors. Attacked Iraq, which we thought was a good idea. The non-aligned movement, collection of what we used to call third world countries, met in Iran recently. The group has vigorously endorsed Iran's right to enrich uranium, and some members, India for example, adhere to the harsh U.S. sanctions program only partially and reluctantly. The U.S. is desperately trying to get this sanctions program, the one that something on the order of the one that killed 500,000 Iraqi children by the Clinton administration's admission in the 1990s. Get that on Iran. The rest of the world is less willing to go along with this than it once was. The delegates to the non-aligned convention doubtless recognize the threat that dominates discussion in the West, lucidly articulated by General Lee Butler, Clinton's head of the U.S. Strategic Command, quote, "It is dangerous in the extreme that in the cauldron of animosities that we call the Middle East, one nation should arm itself with nuclear weapons, which inspires other nations to do so." He was talking about Israel, of course. Butler was not referring to Iran, but Israel, which was regarded in the Arab countries and in Europe as posing the greatest threat to peace in the Arab world. The United States is ranked second as the greatest threat, while Iran, while disliked, is far less feared. Look at the record. Indeed, in many polls, majorities in the Middle East hold that the region would be more secure if Iran had nuclear weapons to balance the threats that they face. Now, it's this attempt to sort of reverse the situation, try to say what would it be if instead of the American client, Iran was in the position that the American client is in, and that the threat was working the other way, seems to me to be a worthwhile enterprise when we're talking about political dangers in foreign affairs. There's a certain fundamental universalism that we should keep in mind, that what's right for us is right for other countries in the same position, and conversely. I was reminded of an incident of this week after the much praised speech by Bill Clinton at the Democratic Convention. I dug out a piece that I had written in 1999, when Bill Clinton went on television and announced that he was going to start killing people in a place called Kosovo, which most Americans had never heard of, but that he was going to bomb the country. He had no legal right to, no United Nations backing or anything of that sort, but that he was going to do it, basically because he thought it was a good idea. The reasons for his doing it and the actual circumstances have disappeared into the mists of history. But I wrote a little piece that took Clinton's speech talking about the attack on former Yugoslavia, the American bombers sent to bomb a European country, and changed the names a little. Instead of the U.S. bombing Kosovo, I wrote a speech. I just took Clinton's speech to put in the mouth of an imaginary Japanese prime minister explaining why Japan was bombing New Mexico. Now, I'd used Clinton's words throughout the whole explanation and so forth, and it's probably the most reprinted of anything that I've ever written, academic or otherwise. The reason being that people found it so amazing that you could talk this way, that you could think about Japan bombing, killing people in New Mexico, in the same way that we talked about Clinton, the United States, bombing and killing people in Kosovo. That was unheard of. Well, we should hear of it more often, it seems to me. So, gentlemen, I offer you in thoughts about where the political dangers are coming from, the thought experiments. Reverse the equation occasionally and see what it looks like.
Yeah, well, the popular saying is turnabout is fair play. And yes, always look for what symmetry tells you about the situation. And it's a useful adage, I'm quite sure.
That's the funniest thing I got were the number of people who wrote me and said, why haven't I heard anything about this?
Yeah, right.
Have the bombs really started falling in Mexico yet?
Yeah.
And I sent it to the political newsletter Counterpunch that was edited by the late Alexander Coburn, and they sent it back to me and said, okay, we'll publish it, but we can't publish it right away. We find that we can't publish satire during the week. Because people take it seriously. We have to publish it on the weekend and label it as satire, or people take it seriously. So, okay. It's very hard not to take satire seriously when you look at the behavior of the American government, so I suppose I understand this.
Yes, Carl, that whole incident with Yugoslavia back in the 90s, I mean, I have to admit, back during the time period it was happening, I bought into that line that, that NATO and the United States needed to intervene because there was genocide going on. And it's really interesting because when I started digging into it a little bit more over time, I realized that the whole story was a fabrication. That wasn't first of all, a lot of these stories were either significantly embellished or totally made up. Right. There was atrocities going on all sides. You have to remember that we had Croatia was the first country that actually started hostilities against the Yugoslavian government. There was a lot of atrocities there. There was, of course, lots of atrocities being done by the Albanian-backed back me up here a little bit, Carl. The region in the south of Yugoslavia, in which there was actually
in Bosnia. You mean the Albanian? You mean the Albanians in Kosovo?
Kosovo, yes.
Yes, right.
Yes. That were actually Al Qaeda members.
Exactly.
That were actually the U.S. was supporting. I mean, the whole purpose of this was not to prevent genocide. It was basically to destroy a non-market, independent country and economy.
Which American officials admitted later, after the fact. And the thing is, it's like the old television show, the truth is out there, There's things that, when the bombing started in Kosovo, the American commander, Wesley Clark, said, he was asked by reporters who said, the Americans say they're doing this to stop the atrocities being visited upon Kosovans by the Serbians. And Clark says, no, the atrocities have increased because of the bombing. The Serbians are doing that. It was obvious they were going to do that. They've increased that. So, in fact, the bombing is increasing the depredations against the people in Kosovo.
And I think there's a recent parallel, too. I can't remember his name, but it was a German defense minister a couple years ago who resigned his position and actually stated to the press that he was tired of pursuing this alliance with the United States and Britain as far as a quote of war on terror in Afghanistan, when in fact all it was a way to control resources and markets.
In fact, I think it was the German president, and he was talking specifically about Afghanistan.
Yes, that's correct. It was the German president.
His name escapes me too, but Merkel had to turf him out right away and go find another president real quick because the guy had said just what you said, and he let the cat out of the bag. We can't have that. This has been News from Neptune for September 7th in the 36th week of 2012. Our program is named in honor of Noam Chomsky. This has been the I've been thrown out of better bars than this one edition, I think I said. Concluding reflections, gentlemen, we have a minute or two if you want to throw something in here at the end.
So, Carl, you're saying that you were kicked off the local Occupy listserv because you criticized Obama?
Yeah. Well, what I did was promote the demonstration in favor of Bradley Manning and criticize Bradley Manning is the guy who gave the documents about collateral murder and so forth to WikiLeaks, or it's alleged. It said that's not even been established. In fact, I mean, the president has said the man is guilty, but in fact that hasn't been established by a court of law at all. Anyhow, there was a demonstration, Free Bradley Manning. The guy has suffered what the UN has called torture at the hands of the Obama administration. And we had a number of local liberals, not just one, who said, oh, you can't do that. You can't have a demonstration in favor of Bradley Manning right now. It might be understood as criticism of Obama. And several of us nodded and said, yeah, it means pretty serious criticism of the drone killer in the White House. We mean it that way. Well, you can't do that. Mr. Romney might become president. That was enough reason to justify, as it were, the persecution of Bradley Manning and many other crimes that this administration is responsible for.
Well, Carl, I don't know who's in control of the current Occupy movement, Champaign-Urbana's listserv, but this goes. This is totally against the grain of what the Occupy movement is all about.
That's what I would have thought too, yes. If our program has interested you this evening, you might want to look for similar programs here at Urbana Public Television, which does a good job of getting these on the air. And if you can go to their website, urbanapublictelevision.org, and for schedules and information about these programs. Notably, Democracy Now! Seen every morning here at 7 a.m., every weekday morning at 7 a.m., followed by The Big Picture with Tom Hartman. I'm Carl Estabrook. My discussants tonight on News from Neptune have been David Johnson and Ron Szoke. This and other editions of this program can be seen on the website newsfromneptune.com and on Facebook. I can be reached at carl@newsfromneptune.com and on Facebook, and I'm happy to receive your comments, even from Occupy people. Our thanks to UPTV, especially Jake, Jason, and Caleb. Inshallah, we'll be back next week with a new edition of News from Neptune to remind you, in the words of Edward de Vere, what's past is prologue, what to come in yours and my discharge. In the meantime, confusion to our enemies, and a good night to you.